folks. Zach, were we able to confirm the ASL translator or ASL interpreter?
Oh, I don't. Oh, let me see. Let me check with them.
Okay. Yeah, they were great last time. Welcome, folks. Welcome, folks. We will get started momentarily as folks join. We'll give folks maybe one more minute before we get started. So unfortunately, we have lost both Naomi to Boston and also Lizzie to North Carolina. But I've been promised by MODA that we'll have Sharon and Matthew in the process of being confirmed. So hopefully we'll have our 4, and then possibly also have someone from ODR and OHR as well. So I think we can go ahead and just get started for now. I'm Karthik Balasubramanian. I am a, let me just turn on, right here. There we go. Yeah. I'm Karthik Balasubramanian. I'm the chair of the Multimodal Accessibility Advisory Council. Welcome to the September 2025 meeting. This is a body that is appointed by the mayor that focuses on amplifying the voices of people with disabilities as it relates to transportation or issues around the district. I live in Ward 6 and work in Ward 1, and I have an eye condition called macular degeneration, which makes it not possible for me to drive, and also puts me in the majority of people with disabilities who don't have a car or don't operate one. So I will pass it off for intros, and I'll pass it over to Kelly.
Hey everyone, Kelly Mack. I'm a longtime DC resident and power wheelchair user and also a non-driver. And I live in Ward 3, and I'll popcorn it over to how about Matthew?
Hi, I'm Matthew. My first time joining. I'm deaf. I am been in DC about 7 years now, and I live and work in Ward 5. I'll pass it over to Ashton.
Hi there, everyone. I don't think there are any other members, right? Or members to be membered. Okay. My name is Ashton. I live in Ward 6. I do not have any disabilities myself, but try to consider myself as an advocate and ally for folks with disabilities in the transportation space. And I'm always really grateful to be welcome here, and it's nice to see some friendly faces. I will pass it over to Tim.
There we go. Can everybody hear me? Oh, perfect.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm happy to join tonight. My name is Timothy Marr. I'm lead urban designer with the DC Office of Planning. And I believe I'll be speaking to everyone about some ongoing projects and plans downtown.
Great.
But yeah, I'll pass it over to Zachary.
Hey, good evening, everyone. This is Zach Smith, liaison to the MAAC from the District Department of Transportation. Glad that everyone is here. And I will pass it to Lakeisha.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Lakeisha Love Pettis, and glad to be here. I'm also with DDOT as the chief, and I'll pass it on to, I believe, Blake is the last person.
Let's see. We've got, oh, actually, I saw him or her, but then they dropped. Why don't we go to Jonna?
I am Jonna. I'm with the DC Highway Safety Office, and my camera is having a Wednesday. Otherwise, I would be waving to all of you. But delighted to be here and hope everyone's doing well.
Perfect. Great. Thanks, everybody. So I think we have covered everybody, if I'm not mistaken. I think we can go ahead and get started. So this week we do have some things on the agenda, but our first item of business is Office of Planning, focusing on the downtown core redesign. This was an important meeting for us, and you're very important here, Tim, today, because as you know, the downtown core is very inaccessible to folks with disabilities and oftentimes quite hostile for anyone who's not in a car. And which is particularly important to us because 40% of people in DC already don't own a car or operate a car, but then even more, people with disabilities are significantly more likely to not own a car. And I wanted to start off first by sharing, this is an important document for us. Our principles, which basically set forth our view of how street space should be allocated for accessibility, equity, and reliability and efficiency. For any arterial street, or really any street, the first and foremost thing that should be considered are ADA compliant sidewalks, because everyone is a pedestrian at some point, but particularly important for people with disabilities. Then 24/7 dedicated protected lanes for public transit and emergency vehicles, a nod to the fact that significantly more people can be moved by the most accessible form of public transit, and that is the bus. Then ADA and pickup drop-off zones that are exclusively able to be used by folks with disabilities. Right now, there are no ADA pickup and drop-off zones in the district. Then protected bike lanes and scooters and power wheelchair lanes that are separate from cars. So as you know, in the downtown core, people are not allowed to ride on the sidewalk, but often do. So you see a lot of bikes and scooters on the sidewalk. And a big reason for that is that there's no lanes for them in the street where they should be, because oftentimes people feel like it is too dangerous to be riding on the street because you've got out of control cars and parking all over the place that makes people that hinders visibility and then also directly threatens them with speed. Then bicycle and scooter parking is hard and daylight infrastructure to keep people off sidewalks. And then only should we start allocating space to general purpose motor vehicle travel lanes, only after 1 through 5 is done. Then ADA only parking, then ADA accessible parking and streeteries, then tree boxes and green space, and then only after that should there be truly market priced car parking, which there actually is none in the district. It's all subsidized. And heavily subsidized at that. So right now, we believe our priorities in our street space usage is way out of whack. And we have a strong interest, as DC is investing a lot in downtown, that we don't invest in 1960 design in 2025. So with that, I will I will hand it over to our Office of Planning guest. Tim, do you want to take it away?
Absolutely. All right. Yes, thank you all for having me tonight. Give me one moment. I do have a presentation, so let me figure out how to share my screen. Here we go. And then let me go ahead and make that full sized. All right. Oh, I think by doing that, I cover you all up. So, all right. Can you see the screen okay?
We can. Yeah.
Okay, so I can't see you under this setup, and I wish I had the foresight to test this out. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to type in the chat. I won't see it right away, but go ahead and someone let me know. And I'm happy to keep this more conversational. This doesn't have to be a lecture. You know, at any point, if anybody has any questions, let me know and we can chat about it.
Sounds great.
So I think, and I'd like to keep this relatively brief so we can get more to comments and questions afterwards.
And
but
were you able to review the questions that we had sent over?
Okay, I can pull some of those up.
No. I just wanted to make sure you received those.
Oh, yes.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
It
would be great to have you share your presentation. Then we can get into the questions.
Perfect. Okay. And I think some of the questions that were sent are very big thinking, and I want to caveat that the district is thinking big about downtown, but this downtown public realm plan is almost a foot in the door for presenting a lot of ideas that do need some ironing out, do need some adjusting, and you know, we're happy to present this to you and receive like critical feedback from you all as well.
Great.
But to start, you know, what is the Office of Planning? We have a number of divisions within our agency itself, but we are responsible for long range visioning. So a lot of times you might put together a land use plan that is looking 20 years in the future. You know, we're trying to get a sense of who is moving to what neighborhoods and trying to anticipate, you know, what are the schools needs, what are the infrastructure needs, what are the retail needs in those spaces as the city continues to grow. So we do long range land use planning. We also do sort of community by community neighborhood planning. And those can be shorter range plans where they may be anticipating what's going to happen within the next 5 to 10 years. And that might be a bit more granular where we get into some of the transportation opportunities, some of the vacant lot development opportunities, community centers, recreation centers, and the like. We also do some level of very small scale activation and public space uses. We have a role in sitting on the Public Space Committee, various applications that come through that, we do review those. And then we also review a large majority of new development coming into the city, whether it's has to go through a zoning process or whether it has to go through a PUD process. Our development review team also reviews a lot of that. We also play a role in historic preservation. So we will put together historic preservation plans and then review new development or renovations based on how they're adhering to that character of historic communities. So in piecing together the downtown public realm plan, what initially inspired us to do this work was actually it's still a very big question, but it was very narrow in scope. It was as a result of COVID, we saw a lot of office vacancies, and we wanted to understand how can we spur reinvestment, interest, and what this plan grew into is something that did not want to just solve a problem of the next several years. We wanted to look forward. What could a true 21st century downtown be like, and not just responding to gaps created through a post-World War II sort of 9 to 5 office enclave. And so part of that is looking for ways to inclusively bring more people into this space, not just sort of white collar workers or people using that office space. What are ways to sort of tweak this? Because downtown does tend to be a center for culture. in the city. It's where the vast majority of our theater seats are, our museums, art galleries, and the like. So how do we bring people in from that lens as well? But then also, right, I mentioned theaters, museums, etc. A lot of that is occurring interior within private properties. How do we get more of that to spill out into the public spaces themselves to make it a more lively and vibrant locale? So it's not just that sort of lunch crowd, rush hour crowd, but how can we turn this into a series of neighborhoods that run all times of day? And then also open up the door to more prosperity, not just have offices and a lot of the retail dictated by those adjacent uses. We did a survey of a number of restaurants, and the number that just shut down after 5 p.m. when a lot of people go home it was roughly nearly half of all the food service retailers within downtown. So how can we tweak that by bringing more people in, but then also providing better opportunities for entrepreneurs, for new retail access outside of just the model of brick and mortar, because these tend to be some of the highest real estate values in the city. So how can we lower that barrier of entry and get more sort of startups or more smaller scale retailers coming into the space? And we wanted, one of our mottos here was to try to create a downtown for all. And there's this odd dichotomy that you mentioned earlier, right? Downtown does tend to be a hostile environment for people who have ambulatory needs or other sort of aspects to them. But it does remain still one of the most connected parts of the city based on our transportation system. Every color line of the metro leads through downtown at some point. So you have this weird dichotomy, you know, of, well, it is very accessible on that macro scale, but then it's not very friendly and accessible on that micro scale. And so how do we bridge those gaps? But not just through changes to infrastructure, but also spurring the interests that can actually bring people to this space, that can create that tipping point for our work with other agencies that can lead to those capital improvements or those infrastructure improvements. So a quick mock-up of the way we as an office think about our public spaces are not just the streets themselves, also the sidewalks, the public transit stops, those adjacent spaces that are play and recreational centers. And so that can sometimes blur the line of what is private property and what is not. And so we approach the idea of the public realm as if it's any space where a regular John or Jane Doe would assume they can go there and participate in public life. So regardless of where the actual property line falls, if there's a plaza that's built on private property, but someone has the assumption that it can be public, we'll try to treat it with that public access lens. And so a lot of the major goals here are about trying to increase civic participation, increase socialization, and that social cohesion that develops as community members can be outdoors, inhabiting a space, not feel the need to rush on to the next event, but places that can promote lingering and just sort of resting and taking ease in public spaces. A lot of that can also spur health and well-being development benefits as more people get outside, move around, or even just breathe the fresh air after being cooped up inside all day. And then environmental sustainability. This sort of keys into a lot of this, but that the more dense a space like downtown becomes, there's less pressure out on the outskirts of a city for greenfield development. So the more people we can comfortably and appropriately move into a downtown where they enjoy being there, that has those sort of scaled up benefits down the line. Just from a high level, after we interviewed a number of people. We went out and did intercept surveys asking people, what do they appreciate about public spaces? What do they wish there was more of? Are there cities they visited where they had a really great experience that experience is not available here in DC? And so from these, we sort of categorize them into a number of different ambitions for the future of our downtown. Feel free to read any of these at your leisure. I'm happy to send this PowerPoint to everyone after the fact. But the idea is really capitalizing on what some of our strengths are. And some of those are this access to history, this access to culture, this vibrancy of the economic base, and trying to drive sort of a magnetic pull into downtown. But then also addressing some of our weaknesses is that we don't have a whole lot of park space down there right now. And of the park spaces we do have, most are still controlled by the federal government. So how can we leverage the district controlled rights of way to actually increase opportunities for lush and landscaped spaces within the downtown itself? This is sort of getting more into the weeds. We did a public life study of this space, and that's where we bring in volunteers. We go out and do direct observation and intercept surveys of people using the spaces.
Tim, I'm really sorry to interrupt. So I think we're not seeing you turn the slide. Have you turned any slides?
I have turned a number of slides.
Okay.
Yes.
So we have not been seeing any of those. We've only been seeing the title screen. So I thought you were actually just giving an intro. Can you try hitting just a view slideshow, and then we see if that changes it?
Yeah, I apologize for so. Let's see.
No, sorry.
They look like nice slides.
Yeah, totally.
Wait, okay, so can you see me?
You're on slide 8, I
switching
think.
Yeah. So now when I click through, are you seeing?
Yes. Now.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if you go to the bottom of your screen, all the way on the bottom right, you're gonna see like a little projector screen. If you click that, it'll make it a full presentation so that we can see it better.
So I was in that, and what it does is it takes up the full of my screen, so I can't see any of you. But let me know. Does it appear like I'm scrolling through slides now?
No, I don't think that functionality works with this platform.
All right, so let's see here. Maybe I can just, that doesn't help me much on that front. That's a little bit better. Well, there we go.
That works. Yeah. Okay.
All right. So I'll just finish.
Thank you.
Yeah. Perfect.
Nope. Together we problem solve, right?
Yep.
All right. So I'll just scroll through these quickly, but I'm happy to send this out so that you can go at your own pace. But right, I was mentioning our plan wants to see a downtown that's inclusive, vibrant, and prosperous. This is more of a cutesy graphic that shows like what are the different types of people that we want to see using downtown, and it's everyone from early risers to lobbyists to the corporate folks, but also those with strollers, those who are students, those who are tourists, those who are just here for the museum or an art show. So all of the above are the people we want this plan paying attention to. And then this is just a diagram of the different characteristics that make up the public realm, and then here's what's the value that we see in that, right? The social cohesion, the health and well-being, etc. And then these are our ambitions that I was mentioning earlier. And then this is the slide I ended up getting to. But to do a public life study, we go out and we directly observe people in public spaces. So we're not just taking interviews asking people, what's your favorite experience downtown? Like, we want them in those spaces and showing us the things that they may not be willing to tell us, or that they just don't think about, right? So when was the last time you're walking down the street, you need to take a break, there's a low wall, and you just rest on it for a minute or two, and then you go back out on your way? That's not the sort of thing that we capture by asking people, what do you do downtown? But that's the sort of thing that we can see through direct observation. So we did downtown, our border of downtown for the study was 200 some odd blocks. We did not have the manpower or the volunteer power to go out and observe across the board, but we did pinpoint these sort of hot spots where we knew a lot of people do tend to either congregate or go. And we're using these as sort of a model for, well, can these describe to us the way people use downtown public spaces? So we broke them down into categories of large open spaces, such as Franklin Square, smaller ones, such as Duke Ellington Park up on M and New Hampshire, office corridor spaces, and then those privately owned public spaces, and any place that has a strong civic or a cultural draw. And what we came up with was, and this is where I sort of caveat this plan. I think we began with this sort of, how do we transform a 21st century downtown, and realize this sort of document can be very conceptual at this stage, but we need to bring in a lot more partners for that big, bolder vision. And actually, my last, I'll skip around. My last slide is a sort of pitch for OP is now engaging with stakeholders and people across the district about our new comprehensive plan. And that idea, that is the big idea generator that brings sort of the tooth of law to the implementation side of things. That looks to sort of writ large describe the way the city is going to grow and change over the next 30 years. So this plan, the Downtown Public Realm Plan, is attempting to tee that up and say, one of the ways to resolve office vacancies and this sort of deadening of a downtown after 5 p.m. because of the way we built up our cities post-World War II can be transitioned to a series of neighborhoods. How can we bring in more residential into downtown to make up for that loss of some commercial and office? But how do we then also fill the gaps in that with the public realm? So to take a former office building and convert it to residential is a multi-year, very expensive process. But when that's completed, do we have enough schools? Do we have enough rec centers? Do we have enough opportunities for people in a residential neighborhood within that downtown space? And we just don't have that. So how do we bridge that gap? And part of that is the public space. How can we increase the ability for recreation opportunities, for retail opportunities? We have a few libraries in this area, but is there a sufficient number of them to address the needs of, if we do bring in 15,000 new residents, 20,000 new residents over the course of a 5 to 10 year period? So a lot of that, this is looking and putting out the feelers and testing concepts so that the comprehensive plan can sort of put the roots, start building the roots for that ecosystem to emerge and evolve from this, if I'm explaining that clearly. But a few of the ideas here are, downtown is not a monolith. There are multiple sort of character areas within it, and we have the ability to sort of test and prod and see, well, how much of that was sort of happenstance by the way it developed, and how much of there is there. So for instance, the Vermont Avenue corridor, we recognized as it leads up into the 14th Street Northwest corridor. There's a lot of residential there. This space had more opportunity for office to residential conversions to happen more quickly than other parts of downtown. So our idea there is to sort of build up and bolster more of a Main Street type feel. How can we start to then encourage hardware stores or the kind of things that are more closely associated with a lot of residential into that corridor versus Connecticut Avenue between DuPont Circle and Farragut, where there is still a stronger office component, but you're closer to a university, you're closer to some museums, you're closer to a lot of nightlife that occurs up in the M Street and Connecticut area. So that might be less receptive to getting more residential, but how do we then bolster the cultural aspect of that street? And those are sort of some of the ideas, but it's meant to be a within the next few years, testing concepts within each of these sort of neighborhood distinctions to see how well they stick, to see how well people begin to respond to those, and then use that longer sort of capital improvement process to then say, well, we have a pretty solid comfort level with these ideas for retail changes in Vermont. Now, how can we go in and say, what are the sidewalk needs in that space, right? Does a Main Street on Vermont need wider sidewalks so that shops can have some of their items out for sale or have show windows or have various other things going on within the public space itself? Sorry, my son just got home. Let's see. Oh yeah, so I began to talk about Connecticut Avenue, and this was actually interesting because we were at this plan was published sometime last year, and so we were able to put in some budget requests to test some activations within these. One of those spaces was Farragut Square, and to try to bring in more of that cultural tie-in with adjacent museums. The National Geographic Museum is in process of coming in and expanding into this area. So the mayor unveiled several large-scale artworks and sculptures in and around Farragut Square that are looking to be the kind of things that are interactive within the space. So there's a number of musical note sculptures that when you turn a crank, it begins playing music out in the public spaces. So I had the opportunity to just go down there today in between some of the rain and see one of these things installed in these spaces. And they should remain out here for the remainder of the year. And I think we have a possibility to extend it out into the following spring. Excuse me. Oh, my slides. Oh, there we go. And then the block that connects Lafayette Square with Farragut Square is one where there's a few garage entrances to the office buildings that tend to be used maybe only in the morning, only during rush hours. But really, there isn't a lot of vehicle traffic within this space. And this is an area where we work closely with the bid to measure the number of people walking up and down this space, the number of cars coming up and down this space. And we realize this is just one of those stretches that's redundant. It's not really needed for the roadway kind of infrastructure. How here can we expand the sidewalk uses, get more sidewalk cafes, find the right opportunities to maybe close the street altogether to vehicle traffic, to have markets, to have festivals, to have spaces where people can inhabit the public spaces themselves and not have to worry about conflicts with traffic. We've worked closely with DDOT, and I think there's ongoing discussions as to whether this is a sort of permanent closure, but we do have opportunities now to start testing, on certain weekends, on certain weekdays, do this temporarily, but then take all of those data points to say, well, this did not cause, backup on adjacent roads. This did not cause delays in bus service. This did not cause, any number of other things. So we are working closely with sister agencies to test some of these concepts to see which ones can go from sort of temporary to possibly taking on a more permanent condition in the city. Here also, one of the major ideas is that the White House itself gets million or so tourists coming to it. The National Mall gets several million each year. How do we sort of start to build in spaces immediately adjacent to those that act as funnels or gateways to sort of pull some of that tourist activity excuse me, up into the district proper itself, and see if we can find retail benefits that come from that. So this is one of the early concepts that we're looking to really roll out and begin testing within the next year or two. I mentioned Vermont Avenue as the retail focused, or the smaller scale neighborhood focused street. And here the idea is, prioritize things that residents would need, like grocery stores, hardware stores, expand the tree pits in this space to add in more landscaping, so there's more of a softer feel within the right-of-way itself. And then adding in that additional infrastructure, such as bike lanes, scooter lanes, etc. And one of the this is one of the more ambitious concepts, and it's one we're working closely with the Deputy Mayor's Office, DDOT, and a few other agents, Department of Parks and Rec. But identifying park spaces downtown has been a challenge because many of them are federally controlled, and many of them are sort of, for lack of a better term, very formal in their orientation. They're grassy spaces that have a horse statue in the middle, but there's not opportunities for a track, for like track and field type running activities. There's not the playgrounds. There's not, the exercise equipment or other things. You can't get a really lush canopy for garden type spaces here. So many of the major parks downtown are found either along a K Street or I Street spine. And if we were to connect those and rather focus on sort of that typical city infrastructure of concrete sidewalks and concrete buildings in between, what if those could be made into their own park-like spaces between the parks? So this one's a bit more ambitious. There's a lot of work we have to do to partner with the private properties to understand the needs and access points, because this is a long stretch of road, but prioritize transit on a corridor like this, and then expand sidewalks so that more of that space can be green and landscaped in nature, and really aim for tree species that will have that long-term large canopy growth, and build something that's an arboreal street within the downtown itself. We toyed with the idea of something like this becoming almost like the Strojet in Copenhagen or some other cities across Europe, where it could be completely pedestrianized. And the sense there was that an early concept could show that being interesting, but there's a lot of data collection that you have to do for something like that first. So this plan stepped back from fully proposing that, with the idea that we'll continue working with partners to see test the feasibility of it. We have put in budget requests to attempt to study a 3-block long corridor of this that would connect Farragut with McPherson, possibly a little past to Franklin Park itself. And we're currently working with partners to see just how quickly we could get a temporary version of that up and running, so that we can begin collecting the data points that could bolster an argument for this moving long-term or becoming a longer stretch of roads. And then the idea of Gallery Place sort of becoming the cultural commons for the city. In our polling, we asked people, what are some of your favorite public spaces, favorite experiences downtown? And polling showed that people tend to love Franklin Park. And then their next several were all within a like 3-block radius of the Portrait Gallery. So the Portrait Gallery is a favorite. The F Street Holiday Market is a favorite among people. The MLK Library is a favorite, and then just the experience being in Chinatown itself. We also know the mayor's putting a lot of money into renovations for the Capital One Arena. One of our concerns has been, that's a regional draw, and as the region keeps growing, the number of seats in the arena tends to not. So how can we make this a more inclusive experience for sports within our public realm itself, with the understanding that, as ticket prices go up, that excludes a lot of people from having that kind of opportunity for that experience. So right now we're putting together a sense of how often could we close F and G streets around the Portrait Gallery and maybe portions of 7th Street, especially on like game day things, have a large screen out there that's showing the game interior, but allows people out in the street to sort of celebrate alongside that and make it more of a public event rather than an indoor ticket purchasing only type of event. That might be a bit more of a long shot, but it is one that we're looking to see what the feasibility is through testing and through some studies in the near term. But this is one of the ideas, taking sort of that holiday market model and expanding it into additional weekends, additional weeks, maybe have several weeks set aside in the summer for a summer market. But really utilizing 3 or 4 sides of the Portrait Gallery to really draw people in, and either limit 7th Street to bus traffic only, or find the right cadence of pushing traffic onto other streets and having this space really be sort of that pedestrian focused residents and tourists sort of commingling in this cultural space. And so I did mention earlier, a lot of this in this plan right now is very conceptual. Rome isn't built in a day, nor is it built by a single agency. We have been working very closely with DDOT on testing a number of these on DPR, with DPR, Department of Parks and Rec, to find, well, what's the right balance that you have all found in recreational opportunities in park spaces. What are your list of top wants if you were to have access to some of these federal parks? How can we support that moving forward? And one of the big things that can sort of codify a lot of that and sort of lock it in place is with this development of the new comprehensive plan. We've been putting out feelers. We're going out to various events, festivals, market days. We have staff at a number of these, but I think the idea is to really kick off with a bigger public engagement session coming up this fall. And we'll be asking questions like, how do you want to see your city treating it? Like, what do you want to be when you're part of this city? What do you see are our shortcomings? Where do you see more housing needed? Where do you see more recreation needed? Where do you see, a whole slew of other things? But sort of the sneak peek, at least what we're talking about behind the scenes is, if we're anticipating a city that has 850,000 residents by 2050, if we have 1 million jobs within the city by 2050, where are those people going to go? So where should we be pushing for additional housing? Is the idea to sort of push for density downtown? Is that a solution? Or are there opportunities for more middle housing out all across the city? Or is it going to be a both and, right? These are questions that sort of we can start to ask ourselves, but we need to engage the public and get that sense of what are people really interested in, how they want to shape their city moving forward. And then the last point on this is our previous comprehensive plan We originally wrote it in 2006. It's been updated twice, but both of those were updates in which not a whole lot of the language was permitted to be changed. We were allowed to update numbers and data and some demographic type stuff, but largely the plan was the 2021 release of the plan was very, very close in structure to what was originally released in 2006. So the big idea for this one is to make it so much more accessible to people. Right now, it's a 1,200 page document where I would guarantee no one in the city has read the whole thing, right? So we want to limit it to maybe 300 pages max and eliminate all the redundancies. A lot in it, we had a transportation section that lays out big transportation goals for the city, but then DDOT has MAACDC. And so every time one of those is updated, but the other isn't, there are these odd redundancies. Which plan is more topical? Which plan is the one we turn to? So what we want to do is sort of keep the transportation chapter with DDOT in their MAACDC program, but then have the comprehensive plan identifying the major long-term trends, the land use implications, the public space implications for a lot of that. So we want it to be a much more nimble document that can grow with the various agencies as they set sort of the priorities on their specific topics of interest or topics of expertise. So I'll go ahead and I've been talking a long time. I'm rambling at this point. I'll shut up, but I'm happy to take any questions or if anyone has any comments or concerns from what I presented.
Kelly, I'll turn it to you first.
Oh, sure. Thank you so much. This was really fascinating. And really appreciate your time today with showing us this really beautiful deck and talking us through kind of how you're thinking things through. One of my questions for you is, so you talked about going to spaces and watching how people interact. And I'm wondering, how do you do that for people who might not be showing up because places are inaccessible? I'm just thinking myself, just one person, wheelchair user. There are places that I avoid going to because I can't navigate them. And I think you want to kind of break that, right? You want to have a different vision. So how do you follow people? Do you kind of, I mean, I guess I'm just, how do you kind of get through that kind of?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And that's a great question. And there's a lot of sensitivities that go into these sort of studies. So we will never follow someone. We'll find a point in time where we stand still and observe people over the course of a day. But you're absolutely right that observation bias, where you are recording people in those spaces, means you're not recording people that aren't in those spaces.
Right.
And this is a really poignant question because on the side, I'm actually trying to draft a paper that's due out in the next few months on how we can better make public space studies more equitable and remove a lot of that bias.
Yeah.
One answer to your question is we do also have census data and demographic informations for areas in the city. And so if we're, for example, out there observing a place and we're tracking who we see in real time, we can compare it to, well, who do we know lives in this neighborhood and why is there a discrepancy, right? A big case in this is not just for, people with disabilities, but like you may go into a space and know demographics. This is a community that is 50% Black, 50% white, yet we're going out and only observing 70% white people in this space. Does that mean Black people don't want to be in public? No, that doesn't mean that at all. What it means is there's a discomfort in being out and being your authentic self in that space. And that's something we have to take into account for our studies. So right now, unfortunately, the answer is we just have to pay attention to who is missing from the data point as we're observing. And then build better ways to actually create surveys that can reach the people that either don't feel they're welcome or don't feel like they have equal access in those spaces.
I'm wondering if it would be worthwhile to have sort of a panel of people that you could say, hey, let's go visit this park and see how they interact with it.
Mm.
And if I come and I'm like, well, I can't even get into the park, then you've learned something. Because I'll just say from personal experience, a lot of times non-disabled people do not see the barriers that I see right away. So I'm wondering if, the MAC, some of us might be willing to serve in that kind of capacity and to say, hey, like, let's go to the portrait gallery neighborhood and I can show you. I have things in mind. I can show you things that don't work for my disability. I'm sure other disabilities would have different things to say, but I think that might be useful because I understand what you're saying about well, we can see who's missing, but you might not see what the barriers are. Right.
Yes.
And so kind of threading that needle. So just a thought on that as you go through the process to maybe see if you can recruit a panel of volunteers, DC folks who might be willing to give you that kind of feedback. And the other thing, I don't know if there is such a place, but to visit or meet with people where there's a accessible nirvana, you could kind of get some of those design ideas about how to bring some folks in. And one of the other things I want to mention is older adults, because their disabilities may be different or new or in combination, that might be able to give you some good feedback there. Like I think I read a piece recently, an op-ed about we need more benches everywhere in our society for people just to sit down for a moment, not just for older adults. So just a couple preliminary ideas, and just want to ongoing talk with you about how do we bring in disabled perspectives and voices. And it's okay to talk about disabled people and to make that comfortable and natural in planning, and also to take those feedback and really solicit and involve different kinds of disabilities in these questions and explorations, because I think we need to think about the future being accessible and what that means and what changes will need to be made to make that really happen. Thank you.
No, thank you so much. And just sort of, this doesn't fully answer your question, but one thing our office has done, and it depends on the project we're taking on. And so, for example, the downtown one, covering a lot of space, a lot of our recommendations were very high level and conceptual. However, when we did, we assisted with some streetscape design recommendations for the Union Market area. And so because that was a finer grained study, we were able to make like sort of individual, this intersection needs this intersection needs this, right? We couldn't take that sort of fine grain approach with the downtown public realm plan yet. But we paired with students in a class at Gallaudet University to go out and sort of walk a handful of blocks and get direct input from neighbors and students and other people to sort of identify the deficiencies block by block at that level. So I think absolutely, I think we don't do enough to incorporate a lot of that into our big, longer range planning or our conceptual stuff. We have had some successes with the finer grain things where we can go out and say this ADA curb ramp at this intersection is not working because it's too close to this fire hydrant or something like that. So we've taken that sort of finer grained approach, but right, it needs to be better incorporated writ large into a lot more of our work. But
yeah, because I think when you're
your comments are
talking big things, I think even sometimes how
Mhm.
we orient things in an accessible way
Mhm.
may change the vision. So that's why I say like early and often to get that perspective, I think would be helpful.
Absolutely. Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, and then also just kind of the piggyback, I think there's, in order for a vibrant, like a really vibrant place, like an indicator species is kids. And curb cuts are super important, not just for people in wheelchairs or people who use wheelchairs, but also for strollers. And I'm just looking at this and I'm just thinking about like how, like, no, or young families, like nobody in the right mind would let their kids actually play in a park in downtown DC because it's such a car sewer. Like, they're people that we've designed our streets so that there are many lanes, wide lanes, lots of parking, lots of illegal parking that obstructs. Our one big focus for us is daylighting. It's just like just trying to get DC to follow its own laws to make sure that people don't park within 25 feet of a crosswalk. And that you see that all over, including in downtown, and even in some of the like kind of the most like the cultural corridor right adjacent to the Porter Gallery. Like there's plenty of stuff there's plenty of parking that is totally legal, and makes it very hostile for anyone to be crossing the street, let alone children or anyone lower or slower. And that is just like, these are kind of quick hits that we've tried to highlight, but we're not getting really any traction. But just to kind of underscore Kelly's point of like, there's just a lot of places where, like for example, you're not going to find people with disabilities using places that are super hostile, much more hostile than people actually realize. If you're coming in, if you're driving into the Wilson building every day, you have no idea because you are a driver and you're part of traffic, and you're part of making the city already unsafe. But you don't realize it. You have no idea that you're actually part of the problem. So anyway, I just really want to underscore that point of like, there are a lot of people missing. There are people with disabilities that are missing. There are kids that are missing. Basically the contrast between DC's downtown and really any European capital it's like comparing, us to Oklahoma. Like that's the difference. Like, DC is to a European capital as like Oklahoma is to DC. Like that's the difference. Like we got nothing. And yeah, I just worry that like this is like way not ambitious enough. Like we were in Montreal, my partner and I were in Montreal this summer, and they've got miles of closed streets. And we're talking about like a single block, barely, or like actually a third of a block. Like
Yep. And even when we do, it's temporary, right?
So, yes,
for a day at most.
Exactly. And F Street, like I'm pretty sure F Street was closed in the 70s, and somehow like it's now a fight to get it closed. Even like that one block, ridiculously well served by public transit, every single line within a 2-block radius of every metro line within a 2-block radius of the Portrait Gallery. Like that is, it's really, this is such an obvious thing. And that's where it's just like, it's hard not to look at this and say like, come on, like, what is this? Like, we could be doing so much better. I don't know. You're fighting the good fight. I know there are tons of constraints, but I just, wish we were a lot more ambitious than where we are right now.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And all of these are good points. And I think, and let's see, my wife and I were in Mexico City a few months back, and their historic downtown, they have a 8-block grid that's just all pedestrian. And it was amazing walking down because it was both crowded, but not so crowded that you felt compressed, but there were like people everywhere. And,
Yep.
yeah, so my office has done some analysis on this. I don't think we've gotten permission to really hit the ground running with bold concepts. But I think one of the things, at least in the back of my mind, that I'm excited about is that with the comprehensive plan, if we can push for land use changes that start to bring a lot more residential into a space like downtown, that does a number of things. Having that density of people who are there on a day-to-day basis helps bolster retail. And I think one of the big challenges we usually have is it feels like so many people who own a business are just sort of keeping it together. And when they hear the city coming in with changes to a street, they sort of push back and say, well, if you change the model I'm comfortable with, that doesn't excite me. That scares me. And so one of the things is that if you have that deeper density of residents within a space, so closer to a New York, if we're looking for US examples, but then Mexico City, Paris, London, a lot of those spaces that are able to close longer stretches have the retail that remains bolstered within those spaces because they're comfortable knowing this walking paradise around here is bringing in the number of people I need to sustain my business. Now it's not a silver bullet, but I'm, at least from my office's point of view, really optimistic that that's a trajectory we can explore with the comprehensive plan. But I hear you loud and clear. My dad was in the Air Force. We traveled a lot. I've lived on 4 different continents over the course of my life, and just being out there and seeing the way other people think of cities as natural because they were built before highways is, and they still exist even though they don't have the highways cutting through the middle of them. We can challenge ourselves to do a lot more.
For sure. And from just a tax perspective, like the tax per unit area is way higher in a retail dense environment, like where there is no parking. And then again, I'm like, this is not a rocket science type formula. It's just take less space to cars so that it can be more space for people. More people means more business, and like that is good for the city. And I think that's where it's just, even, and the thing that I worry about with kind of seeding some of the transportation element to DDOT is we want nowhere. DDOT has this LOS metric of kind of level of service where you're just measuring the success of an intersection based on delay of a car. But if we're talking about downtown vibrancy, where we want people, not car. We especially don't want cars. We want people. And what I worry about is that the metric is going to incentivize driving through rather than driving to. And that's where that's what I worry. You look at a lot of European capitals, there are very few places they're totally pedestrianized, but there are a lot of places where cars are guests, and not the primary not the primary user. And that's where I worry that, you can create a lot of places where a car can drive to and drop someone off, and then turn around. But for example, that whole Mount Vernon Square around Carnegie Library, that's just a giant car sewer that might as well be like a highway intersection, like a highway, a place that's just moving cars. It's just moving cars from one part of the city to another. And because of that, that Carnegie building that is like a beautiful building that could be part of like a really historic walk, is just totally separated because we decided to just allow people to go from one part of the city all the way to another, even though they have infinitely number of other routes around. But we've made that so convenient and we've just totally just thrown up our hands and say, hey, and what I worry about is DDOT. They've got a group called IPMA that makes all of these decisions, and they're not their goal is not about vibrant downtown. Their goal is to make sure we've seen it, the maintenance of traffic. Like that is their goal, is to minimize car delay. That is their goal. And that's what I worry about when we cede this to DDOT.
No, I think all of these are fair points, and I think on that end, I think OP, just being the agency that handles land use and that future long range land use of spaces, and DDOT, right? Land use and transportation sort of very much go hand in hand, and the idea that we could bring additional residents into downtown, right? You have limited right of way, you have right of way that can't grow. Right, our 90-foot streets are sort of set in stone that you can't expand them much more. But so ultimately, right, DC is dealing with something that like a lot of suburbs and places have to contend with that thankfully we don't, in that we can't just build more lanes, build more capacity that way. So as the city grows, as we're proposing more density into downtown, a lot of that solution has to be from rapid transit and other options. So I do think there's at least a dialogue between that land use element that is seeing that future, that is seeing, bigger crowds coming into that space and helping sort of lead a discussion with DDOT and the transportation planners that understands, okay, there may be a breaking point coming, there may be something coming that we deal with through the structure of the comprehensive plan. That's sort of one route. And a lot of your comments sort of made me think of an aside, and it's just we haven't dealt with this in a hot minute. Part of what we were looking to do with the downtown public realm plan is through our surveying, through our asking people questions about downtown, a big topic that kept coming up was public safety. We don't feel downtown is a safe space. How are you going to address that? So when we went back and discussed that with people, again, we were like, please, explain that to us. Like, what is your issue with public safety? And through our polling on that front, when people talk about public safety, they mean so many different things. There's a small chunk of people that are like, well, safety from crime. But there's this really large chunk of people who are like, safety from crossing the street and not being hit by a vehicle. So once you sort of I think in our polling, the biggest concern, the number one, the most people said was public safety. But once we pared it down and got a sense of, well, what are you talking about? At least 50% of that number was, we are concerned about too much traffic in this space, and that being a life safety concern. So we did parse that out a bit in our studies, and we want to continue sort of asking a question from that frame of view. We also asked, we did some minor asking about like transportation methods you use to get to the space, what could better meet your needs coming to the space. And I'm blanking on the exact number, but it's something high. It was like 60-fold. The number of people who asked for more parking spaces versus this massive number of people who are like, I need better bike facilities, I need better bus facilities, I need right? So the people asking for the expansion of public transit, micro mobility, dwarfed the population that was like, I need better car experience here. So I think we want to lean on that and use that as part of the discussion moving forward. Something we explored a little bit, and it became something a little too onerous to tackle as part of this project, is getting a sense for just how much parking is even needed downtown, especially street side. We have a lot of buildings, a lot of office buildings that had to build really large parking garages underneath them. And the city, and I hope I'm not airing too much dirty laundry from the city's perspective. We don't know how many parking spaces or what capacity these parking garages have across our downtown. We know the minimum they had to build because zoning requires a certain amount of them, but we don't know what they actually built.
Right.
So getting a sense for just how many overbuilt underground private garages there are, would that clear up a lot of this by just saying, make all of those publicly accessible? That way you and your garage can make some money from people coming in. That way we can reduce these subsidized spaces curbside that allow for like reserve a number of them for like pick up and drop off, taxis, Ubers, so that they're not like parked in a travel lane when they're picking someone up. But then also make those spaces so that, you know, other functions can exist within those, whether it's scooter corrals, whether it's bike corrals. So that ended up being, because we couldn't really gather enough of the data in a timely manner, we unfortunately didn't have a whole lot of recommendations in the downtown public realm plan about that. But it is now on our radar, and we're working with our development review team and through this comprehensive plan effort to try to get a handle on just what this landscape even looks like when it comes to this. Because I don't think we'll be able to switch on a dime and say, you know, let's get more people riding the train than driving cars downtown. But every time we nudge it in a certain direction and we make it easier to take an alternative path, then we can incrementally move in that direction. And that's you know, we as an agency that's constant, like our comprehensive plan is titled DC 2050 because we want to set the standard for what DC is 30 years from now. So that's sort of our thinking on that level, at least on that topic.
Yep. Yeah. So I think, again, this is one point that we made. We've got another metric that, you know, it's called the time tax. And basically the idea is that people who are too young, too old, too disabled, or too poor to drive, it takes them on average at least 2.67 times how long it takes someone who's driving. So kind of said another way, and that's indeed anywhere from one point in DC to another point. So said another way, the people, so a 10-minute drive is 27 minutes on average on a bus, and all life is just moments of time. And kind of said another way, like DC believes that it is okay for someone who's too young, too old, or too poor to take more than twice as long. So their life is effectively worth half as much as a driver. And that is the status quo on the street. And every time we don't do obvious things like prioritize transit. So for example, like when DDOT and the downtown bid killed the 7th Street bus lanes during the pandemic, that whole transit way, that was basically saying, well, we think that the status quo of your life being worth less than half is okay. We're not going to do anything to fix it. And that's what's at stake. And I think that's the thing that I feel like gets lost so often is just like, there's like a little bit of pushback on some bus lane, and then all of a sudden, like, you know, it just gets canceled. 8th Street Southeast gets canceled. Like 7th Street, like Northwest, got canceled. Georgia Avenue is taking 3 times as long as it should be. Like, and I just worry that, like, without real leadership, it's not coming from DDOT. Like, without real leadership somewhere, we're going to be stuck with the 1960s downtown that we have instead of the, you know, the real 2025 or 2050 that already exists, like, you know, in Mexico City or Montreal or, you know, Barcelona or Madrid or Oslo or Paris, or really any real major city that actually, like, you know, is hospitable and really lively, and actually, you know, not just lively but also like moves lots of people. And where with the vibrant downtown, with lots of tax per unit area, with lots of kids, with lots of old people, with lots of folks with disabilities, like, it's not rocket science. I just feel like it requires courage that not many people are showing. Yeah. So anyway, having said that, maybe just kind of zooming in specifically to that driving to versus driving through concept. Is that something that, like, has, like, come up?
Uh, yes. And it's part of our sense is uh, that if and the way I mean, I'm probably preaching to the choir here, right? Because I think you get a lot of this, right? The way a lot of downtowns were developed and built was a post-war matter and white flight occurring in cities and people moving out to suburbs. And so there was this priority of bringing in people to a downtown and then traveling back out, right? A very, what is it, a spoken hub type strategy for transportation. And so I'm sort of the idea that like land use leads the discussion on what transportation has to respond to. And that I think that's the way it at least works in cities, suburbs, counties. I think they sort of do their own thing. But I think here, because we've had that land use effect that promotes, full floor plate commercial office activity in this space, that we've largely been leading a conversation that says the status quo is okay because it was built to respond to this one land use model that we're still sustaining. And I think we as an agency, and I was digging through, some of our plans from decades ago, that the city writ large in 1971 pitched a bike lane network all through downtown, and nothing really came of it because a whole of other things going on. But I do think like COVID was a difficult time, but it at least put to the forefront of a lot of our planning thinking that we do need to lead sort of this transition to downtown, and land use is sort of that big first step. But then the public realm, let's see, how do I put it? It's transitioning the blocks of downtown from one land use to another is a decade or more process, just because of the nature of development, of the sunk costs that go into building some of these buildings. You need this return on investment before you can sort of reposition it. So changing the land use paradigm of downtown is a decade or longer approach. But the public realm, because it's predominantly city controlled, can be the release valve for addressing the amenities shortage, right? So we had some discussions with DPR about, there are no real recreation centers downtown, yet they have this model of these large, really nice recreation centers all across the city, but they would never be able to purchase the kind of property to do that same thing. Well, yoga studios exist all across this space, right? They have this smaller square footage. And so how do you go about breaking up the different uses that are in a recreation center and say not all of them are located on a single block, but you have this one element of it, on this block, go 2 blocks over, here's this other element of it, right? The weight training room versus the cycle and cardio room versus the play area for kids, right? So adapting a model that sort of helps ease the transition, that says, hey, I'm a big developer. I'm worried about repositioning this property into residential because I don't know if I'm going to get that return on investment. Oh, but the city is pumping in money for these smaller scale classrooms, these other amenity spaces that can at least fill a gap in thinking. That sort of helps transition that. So I think this is a long-winded way of answering your question, but that idea of going through a space versus coming to a space is keen on that, because as you look to reposition downtown writ large as now instead a collection of 5 or 6 interconnected residential neighborhoods, that sort of starts to answer that question, that you no longer have that sort of understanding that I should be able to reach downtown in this quick manner that's easy to make, because you don't tend to think that way when you're thinking about a number of residential areas. You think, I'm not going to cut through this space because the real path goes around. So I think it's long-winded. We don't have any solutions to it, but the idea is that land use sort of leads that discussion. And as we can change and shift the land use, that leads the transportation response to deal with new stimuli rather than having to rely on sort of the same stimuli that they have been relying on.
Got it. Ashton?
Yeah, just one thought on this. I'm always struck. So I'm an urban planner by training, and I know back to my planning classes, land uses are residential and maybe mixed use and retail and office. Streets are land use, and we don't think of them as such, but they are as much a part of how we decide to use the space that's available to us. And so, I'm curious to see how these catalytic projects can contribute to rethinking the purpose of streets as mere conveyances. Like, I can imagine a massive, playground at 8th Street or something that closes off a block, and maybe you have some of those great outdoor exercise machines and bars and things like that. Like, you can use streets for other things, and I come to the holiday market every year. I wouldn't want to necessarily see that go away, because I think it's a huge asset to downtown, but to the extent that we can prompt that kind of thinking, so that we don't just think of land uses as being what's outside of the right of way in between curbs, and activate that for other public benefit, especially in places that are uniquely well served by public transit and by walking and biking infrastructure. Anyways, I've been nodding along for most of this session, and especially when Karthik was talking, I was like, yeah. But I mean, Kelly was saying things, I was like, yeah. So I haven't been on camera, but thank you for your presentation, and hopefully we'll see some imaginative and visionary things happen in the downtown corridor.
Yes. No, thank you for your comments. And yes, I'm eager to see some of these concepts tested and then move forward and adapt and build up on them, right? I have no issue scrapping this plan if we can evolve it and come up with something bigger and bolder in the future. That's sort of the way I build these things, right? I am perfect. I went through architecture school and through planning school, and I had a number of professors who would just tear up my projects. And so I learned to take a step back and say, well, if we can come up with better ideas, then let's push those forward first. So yeah.
Yeah, great. Anything, I mean, and just on my part, this is definitely in the right direction. I think if you take anything, at least away from my comments, it's just that we're taking a baby step where we need to actually take a much bigger step. But yeah, great. I will turn it over to anyone else. So
yeah, I'm sorry if I've taken up your entire agenda.
Great. Well, I very much appreciate it. I think please take away our comments. But especially on the transportation front, I'm just worried that if we let DDOT take the lead, we're just going to get more of the same. And the same, more of the same is not in anyone's best interest from a safety perspective, from an accessibility perspective, from a efficiency perspective, from an equity perspective. None of that. It's all very, very poorly served by the status quo. So yeah, and especially downtown, if we're going to put a lot more money into it, we want to get a lot more people there. Nobody. Maybe the challenge is just imagine a kid in your life, and if you wouldn't feel safe if you wouldn't feel comfortable letting them wander around, then it's the wrong vision. That's the wrong vision. And that's where we get real vibrancy, is where just people can just wander around and walk into shops and spend their money. But yeah, thank you so much for taking the time. We really appreciate it. And
Real quick,
yeah,
Karthik,
of course,
I
of
just
course.
wanted to ask him, what can we do to support and follow up? Like, should we just plan on in 6 months touching base again, or what makes sense for how to push the vision?
Yeah, yes. So most immediately, and I can pull this back up on the screen if I need, but the dc2050.dc.gov website is where we're currently posting information on our engagement for the upcoming comprehensive plan. I'm not sure if we have the survey portal open on it just yet. There had been a survey period. I think it closed. I think we're getting ready to open up a new one for our bigger scale engagement over the fall. So pay attention to DC 2050. And there are going to be opportunities to engage directly with us. And then I'm happy to return in a number of months with representatives from the comprehensive plan team to sort of keep this discussion going on. Yeah.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate you taking the time.
All right. Thank you all.
Okay.
Have a
Take
nice
care.
night.
Okay. So we are almost at time. Maybe what we can do is just do a quick, Neo, would you mind sharing the agenda on the screen? Okay, I will actually instead take over then. Okay, yes. So a few things. We've got, so yeah, we still haven't approved minutes for a while. We actually don't have quorum right now, so we can't approve minutes anyway. I do want to highlight dangerousdc.org. This is basically, yeah, like DC is unsafe, but not because of what's being claimed. It's unsafe because of safety hazards that we are not doing anything about. So we are going to start populating dangerousdc.org with pictures of daylighting issues and also sidewalk and crosswalk obstruction issues. Just FYI. So we have dangerousdc.org, and we're going to start using this more soon. And I think the last thing is, yeah, so we'll approve minutes. We've got, hopefully Sharon, we'll talk more about subcommittees. We've got Destination DC, who is hoping to present to us at some point. I think I want to highlight, in terms of December guests, November and December guests, we're hoping, we've finally heard back from Anthony Crispino, and we're hoping that we can confirm them for November. So we're hoping that, so we could potentially have someone for December. I think I would like to have some, like someone from IPMA. This is the engineer group that does make a lot of these decisions about whether or not a road can be dieted, or we could have road diets or not. So I think that is kind of my preference to invite. We've got, just as a reminder, we've got Jonathan Rogers of DFHV coming back in October. Hopefully we'll have DPW confirmed for November, but I think ideally I would love for D.IPMA to come to our December meeting. Any thoughts on that?
Karthik, that sounds great to me. And if DPW needs to move around at all, I'm
Yep.
okay with that. I would love to meet them before. I mean, even January would be okay.
Yep.
But before a real bad snow, because I
Yeah.
would love to pick their brains about what we can do better.
Cool.
Sounds great.
Excellent. And then, yeah, unfortunately, one bit of news: Rick Burt is no longer at the Highway Safety Office, so unfortunately, we won't be able to have him. But yeah, that sounds great. So then we can hopefully start getting the wheels turning on getting someone from DDOT's IPMA office or branch to come to our December meeting. So in November, we'll have, hopefully we'll confirm DPW, and then October we'll have DFHV director. So I think with that, we don't have a quorum, so we actually can't formally adjourn. But I think we can probably just adjourn informally then at the moment. Any last kind of comments, questions, thoughts from anyone on the call?
I wanted to give another shout out to Zach and team for helping with the sidewalk issue in my neighborhood, and
Yes.
that was miraculous. I just have to say. So thank you.
Right.
Oh,
Right.
thank you.
Yes, absolutely. It's wonderful to see that get done. Cool. All right. Well, thanks everybody for a good meeting of discussion today. We'll reconvene next month, second Wednesday of October, and we will see you all there. Thanks so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
y'all.
Stay
Thank you, everyone.
well.
Have a good one.